Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the James Webb Telescope. Christmas definitely came on December 25th this year, especially for those of you out there who are space enthusiasts, and you know that's because the launch of the James Webb Telescope finally happened on Christmas Day itself. If you don't know, the James Webb Telescope is the largest and most powerful telescope ever developed, with its creation beginning back in 1996. The telescope was created with help from NASA, the Canadian Space Agency, and the European Space Agency, and it cost around $500 million to make. The launch of the telescope has been long awaited, as it was delayed more times than Cyberpunk. Other than the fact that we all had to wait with bated breath, the reason this launch is so exciting is because for the next several decades, this telescope will show us parts of the universe that were previously unseeable to us. We'll get a closer look at and a chance to explore other planets, we'll see the birth of stars, and it might even give us a peek into how the very first galaxies were formed. Basically, this thing might show us more about the universe than we've ever had access to before. It is truly magnificent. Right now, the telescope is passing through its most crucial phase, which is the unfurling of the sun protective shield, and if all goes well, which it seems to be thanks to the ground team working on it every step of the way, we are very close to seeing some of the most amazing space discoveries in human history. In our number 9 spot today, we have the malaria vaccine. In October of last year, the World Health Organization made an important announcement when they approved the world's very first malaria vaccine for kids. There's a couple reasons why this deserved a spot on today's list. The first one being because it is the first vaccine against any parasitic disease, which is a step forward for the world of medicine. But more importantly, this vaccine is crucial because malaria is still one of the most dangerous diseases on the entire planet, and it's one that takes the lives of over 500,000 people annually. The new vaccine cost over $750 million to make, and it began being created and tested all the way back in 1987, so it certainly was not an easy road by any means. This new vaccine is meant to fight against the deadliest of the 5 malaria pathogens, and the medicine is given through 4 different injections. Right now, it is estimated that this shot could prevent about 5.3 million malaria cases every single year. In our number 8 spot today, we have Mars. February of 2021 was a big month for Mars, which is hilarious to say, but also very true. In that time, there were 3 different missions that arrived to the Red Planet, and this wasn't really a coincidence. It was just a few different space agencies taking advantage of the Earth-Mars orbit alignment, which only happens once every 26 months. First, the UAE's HOPE orbiter reached the planet, which is aimed to study the past, present, and future of the Mars climate by orbiting the planet. This will hopefully show us any patterns or changes on Mars, whether they're daily, monthly, or yearly. Then, the CNSA Tianwen-1 began surveying the surface of the planet from orbit before the Zhurong rover touched down on the planet to actually move around the surface. And then finally, we have the Perseverance rover from NASA, which will spend the next few years digging into the soil and rock to collect samples of the planet for us to study. With all of these Mars visits, one of the most important things we learned, or really tested, is how we can fly through the brutal and harsh Martian atmosphere. Basically, the Ingenuity helicopter that came on the mission with Perseverance helps by scouting out the area ahead to highlight any potential hazards or objects that might be of interest. I had to include this quote from an article on indiatoday.in where I found some of this information because it really sums up this whole point so beautifully. They wrote, quote, "This year on Mars, the UAE learned how to orbit, China learned how to land, and NASA learned how to fly." In our number 7 spot today, we have animal evolution. It isn't necessarily surprising for me to say that humans are having an impact on animal evolution. That much is kind of to be expected, especially since we tend to treat the Earth like we're the only ones who live on it. But 2021 showed us some pretty clear examples of just how we are affecting this change. Studies have now shown a sharp rise in the populations of African elephants without tusks. Why? Well, because of poaching, of course. Poachers killed so many elephants with tusks, especially during the Mozambican Civil War from 1977 to 1992, which left the females without tusks more likely to pass on their genes. Another more indirect way that humans are impacting animal evolution is with the changes that we are experiencing in the climate. A study from Trends in Ecology and Evolution has shown that bats are growing to have bigger wings and rabbits are growing to have longer ears, and these are both likely to dissipate more heat into the surrounding surrounding area and cool them down. A study in Science Advances suggested that 77 species of birds found in a remote patch of the Amazon rainforest were found to weigh less and have longer wings, most likely as a result of rising temperatures as well as the changes in the rainfall pattern. In our number 6 spot today, we have the early humans. This scientific breakthrough involves one of the earliest human species, Neanderthals. Some very cool paleontologists from Madrid created a 3D model of the ear structure of Neanderthals. That alone is just an unbelievable sentence. Scientists in 2021 recreated the ear structures of an early human species that lived 130,000 to 40,000 years ago. And that's not even the wild, crazy discovery. I love science. So, they created these 3D models, and it made them then realize that Neanderthals may have had the ability to speak and hear just like Homo sapiens, which is of course the modern human species. Every year we uncover more and more data and material that challenges what we once thought we knew about the early humans. It is so fascinating and interesting to watch it all unfold. In our number 5 spot today, we have Early Humans Part 2. Remember when I just said 2 seconds ago that every year we learn more that changes what we once believed about the early humans and the history of humans? Well, here's another one. In September of 2021, a study dated footprints that were found in the White Sands National Park, and they were said to be from 21,000 to 23,000 years old. For those of you sitting there being like, well, how could they possibly know how old footprints are? These prints, referred to as the ghost prints, were dated by using radiocarbon dating of the dried ditch grass seeds that were found both above and below the footprints. The reason why this dating was important is because prior to this, many archaeologists placed the start of human life in the Americas at around 13,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, and this was based on tools that were found in New Mexico. The paper that published this information, which, just for transparency, has been debated by some, suggests that humans actually lived on the continent during the ice age, which of course changes a lot. A month after this find, there was a study published in Nature that showed evidence of Vikings living in North America earlier than what was once thought. The researchers got to this conclusion by examining cut wood and finding samples of a cosmic ray event that happened in 993 CE. This is definitely a couple of discoveries that are still unfolding and being examined and looked into further, but it's all very interesting. In our number 4 spot today, we have quantum computing. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, this is a discovery that I know very little about, if I even know anything on the topic at all, so bear with me as I try to do my best to explain. To my understanding, quantum computers do in seconds what the best supercomputers would take days or weeks to complete and process. These quantum computers use the laws of quantum physics, which is the thing I know nothing about, to get these incredible processing capabilities, which completely changes the game for a multitude of things like meteorology, cybersecurity, national defense, the list just goes on. Okay, so how does this relate to a 2021 moment? Well, in November of last year, IBM launched the 127 Qubit Eagle, which is the most powerful quantum processor ever. Then a company called Quantinum launched a cloud-based cybersecurity platform called Quantum Origin. Meanwhile, I'm in 2022 still trying to figure out what the cloud is. This is said to set the stage for quantum computing to start rapidly evolving, so I guess I'm gonna need to catch up. In our number 3 spot today, we have Heart of Titanium. With the understanding that heart disease takes an estimated 17.9 million lives around the world every year, it makes a lot of sense that for over 50 years, doctors have been trying to find a way to build an artificial heart, and 2021 saw us getting the closest we've ever been. An Australian research team called Bivacor built a titanium heart that uses something called spinning disc technology. Basically, it of course doesn't operate like a normal human heart, but instead it tries to one-up and improve the regular old evolution-perfected human heart and give it an even better way to pump blood around the body. It has a circular pump that is suspended between 2 magnets that lives inside of this titanium heart. Right now, there has yet to be a full human trial, which makes sense. These things take a lot of time, and it's certainly better not to rush them. The promising news, though, is that the artificial heart has been successful so far in both scenarios in animal trials, as well as when used temporarily on heart transplant patients. In our number 2 spot today, we have coral reefs. Whether you believe in climate change or not, we can all agree that in the last few decades or so, we've seen a lot of natural disasters. From forest fires to droughts and heat waves. Maybe this is a result of climate change, maybe this is just how things go. I'm not here to argue with you, I'm just here to tell you about how this uptick in natural disasters affects our planet. More specifically, our coral reefs. These kinds of disasters and just the general climate of the Earth has an impact on the temperature of the oceans. This change in temperature has caused the reefs, which we forget are living things, to cast out this kind of symbiotic algae that helps them survive, which is then causing the reefs to bleach and then die. In 2021, a huge report was published from the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network that showed that the oceans had lost about 14% of their reefs in the last decade. Then another study was later published that showed that there was less than 2% of the Great Barrier Reef that was able to escape bleaching since 1998. And this was all published just months after a different study that suggested that half of all coral reefs have been lost since the 1950s. Unfortunately, our coral reefs are in a lot of danger right now, and it affects more than just the ecology of the ocean. It will also impact us as humans. It impacts fisheries, tourism, coastal developments. I'm not saying that all of these are good reasons to care, but if they're the ones that get someone interested, then I guess it's something worth mentioning. In our number one spot today, we have the fireball. On February 28th, 2021, reports came pouring in from across the UK of an unusual streak of light that was seen in the sky. These reports were far behind the UK's Fireball Alliance, though, as their cameras had already picked up the signal and they were already in the midst of estimating its landing site. That's right, this streak of light was a meteor. It's a remnant of our early solar system that has been flying through space at unbelievable speeds until it came down through our atmosphere and ended its long, awesome journey scattered in a bunch of pieces across rural Gloucestershire. Teams were sent out to be responsible for the recovery of the extraterrestrial material, which was found in a family's driveway as well as in a sheep's field nearby. This meteorite is a rare specimen known as primitive carbonaceous chondrite, which is said to contain materials that have been essentially unaltered since the formation of the solar system 4.5 billion years ago. The pieces of this meteorite can give us insights into the building blocks of the planets, and it can potentially give us clues as to how the Earth came to be this wonderful planet that possesses all of the resources necessary to sustain human life.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the STELLER'S sea cow. Stellar indeed. Okay, the Steller's sea cow was named after George Wilhelm Steller, who discovered this massive creature in 1741 during the Vitus Bering's Great Northern Expedition. They found her right after the crew became shipwrecked. What a lovely surprise to an otherwise horrible situation. They were around over 2.6 million years ago, and they were no match for humans. They only swam about a meter deep, and once humans came into the picture with, hunting and aggression and everything, they were quite easy to hunt. George Steller commented that the animals had an uncommon love for their families, which in turn made it even easier for us to hunt them. Considering the 1-year gestation period, the species just couldn't reproduce fast enough to keep up with our hunting. But this list, we have a little hope now, don't we? Scientists were able to sequence the genome, which could mean we could see the creature again one day. Hopefully. The answer may lie right now in the DNA of a dugong. Dugongs are the cow of the sea. You know what, they're great. Let's have all the cows of all seas back immediately. Number 9, passenger pigeons. The passenger pigeon once ruled the skies over Canada as recently as the 19th century. Billions of these bright orange birds would just paint the skies. They would fly in flocks so large it would block out the sun for a short amount of time. Isn't that beautiful? It's like some Lion King stuff right there. But only a few decades passed and passenger pigeons are now no more. So what happened? Well, the very last passenger pigeon, her name was Martha. She passed away in the Cincinnati Zoo back in 1914. So we took a look at her DNA to see if Martha held any secrets to her extinction. They discovered Martha had a low genetic diversity for such a growing population. Natural selection and hunting obviously just eliminated the coolest looking bird out there by far. A little different than the pigeons we have today, that's for sure. The last one died in 1914, but in 2019 paleontologists found remains of the pigeon protected in indigenous lands in Canada, up in Northwest Territories. They blended passenger pigeon DNA with Archaeopteryx dinosaur DNA. Yeah, we're bringing back pigeons with a hint of dinosaur. What could go wrong? Number 8, the woolly mammoth. It was announced only months ago that a team of scientists and entrepreneurs over at a company called Colossal are planning to bring the woolly mammoth back to life. That's just the thing we need right now in this world. Out of all the problems, we're like, you know what could solve it? The woolly mammoth, for sure. That'll bring jobs back. The Siberian tundra thousands of years ago was once full of these woolly mammoths, but climate change began to slow them down just a little bit. And humans also needed food, so that surely didn't help. These guys provided warmth and, well, look at them, obviously a lot of food. Genetics company Colossal raised over $15 million to try and bring this thing back to life. Honestly, I hope it works, but then, now what? All these things are great scientifically, but it's like, and then what? Number 7, the dodo bird. Speaking of the devil, we're definitely gonna eat these guys. Dodo birds were once big and beautiful. These flightless ground nesting birds once filled the island of Mauritius, located in the Indian Ocean. They had massive talons, they were big, gray, and blue, and they didn't have any natural predator, which is pretty sweet. They didn't have one until we came along. Around 1507, the island was discovered by Portuguese sailors, and, well, the rest is history. They were the easiest bird to hunt, hence the phrase dead as a dodo. They weren't just loved by sailors either. We're not just 100% here to blame, you know. Monkeys, rats, pigs, any animal that made its way to the island easily had their eggs for lunch. So yeah, it didn't take a long time for the dodo bird population to be completely wiped out. The last dodo was hunted in 1681, but can we bring back the dodo bird? Are we doing it? I think we're gonna do it. Scientists found an extremely well-preserved dodo skeleton back in 2007, so we may have a chance at picking some DNA apart here. A research facility near Melbourne, Australia is currently trying to use pigeon genes to bring this bird back to life. I mean, I'm all for the idea of bringing back an animal. Scientifically, that's a feat in itself, but do we really think nobody's gonna make dodo chicken wings? I'm just saying. That's just a problem waiting to happen. Number 6, PYRENEAN IBEX. The last PYRENEAN IBEX was a female named Celia. A falling tree sadly killed her in 2000. She was a subspecies of the Spanish ibex, and the PYRENEAN IBEX were native to the Pyrenees Mountains on the border of Spain and France, as her name hints towards. Back in the medieval ages though, their population was reduced drastically to an endangered level. So it wasn't just recently, it was way back, you know, because of, again, we got hungry. They were all over the place, and knights and swords and bows and armies to feed. They were hunted down, sadly. Disease spread by humans also played an important role in their demise during this time. The PYRENEAN IBEX was successfully cloned and brought back from extinction for 7 minutes. So we actually did this one. DNA from the last living lady was implanted in the womb of a domestic goat. Lung complications are why the clone didn't last, but listen to what I just said. They made a clone. 7 minutes is a start. I think I could handle a clone of myself for 7 minutes, and then after that I'm tapping out. Number 5, Tasmanian tiger. Once native to Australia, the Tasmanian tiger, also known as the thylacine, it was a massive carnivorous marsupial that went extinct around the 1930s. Major factors here, as you guessed, climate change, hunting, and its genetic diversity wasn't all too great. It was sad on one hand because these beautiful creatures disappeared so recently, but it's recent enough that we have a shot at bringing them back. So we're like, but maybe. Yeah, imagine looking outside and seeing this thing on your front yard. Are we ready for this? Specimens still remain preserved in jars. Thank God for those jars. About time we open those things up, right? All those jar guys are like, finally, pull this one out. Already we have some of the Tasmanian tiger genes present after scientists inserted them into a mouse fetus. The Australian Museum has been working hard to bring this beast back to life. They're only still lacking the DNA to fully recreate it. So if you have any jars of Tasmanian tiger parts, you know, help us out, hit those thumbs. Number 4, the great auk. Once thriving in colonies off North Atlantic coasts, the great auk would grow to 30 inches long, and its tiny wings would be only used to swim. Had little tiny, little wings. The wings were much smaller. They were about 13 centimeters long, little flappy arms. No wonder they couldn't fly. Look at these things, oh my God. They were cute, but obviously they were quite defenseless. Around the 1500s, European fishermen discovered this perfect area for hunting, and it just happened to be where most of these great auks were hanging out. Newfoundland looked like the iceberg from Club Penguin, and then we just rolled in and we're like, we are so hungry. It was packed, so they rapidly declined, and by 1950, the last 2 known specimens were hunted by a single fisherman on Eldey Island, just off the coast of Iceland. Scientists plan on using genetic information extracted from their fossils or preserved organs, remember those jars of organs always coming in handy. They plan on editing their DNA in the closest living species, which is now the razor-billed auk. The organization Revive and Restore is behind the wheel on this one, and I'm hoping they pull through. Number 3, the moa. This New Zealand bird went extinct about 600 years ago. Moa were these flightless birds, massive might I add, and archaeologists first discovered its fossil in a cave. Its flesh and everything was still attached, that's the gross part. These ancient birds would reach about 5 feet tall, and when you think of dinosaurs, you probably think that's quite petite in comparison. These birds stopped flying right after the dinosaurs went extinct. Interesting timing. According to biologist Matthew Phillips from the Australian National University in Canberra, these birds safely roamed the land after they didn't need to make these daring dino escapes in the sky. They walked around, got fat, and would hang out in caves. Honestly, pretty ideal. Phillips says this is an advantage when it comes to birds and evolution because wings, be it big or small, kill energy. So it might seem a little depressing to watch a creature lose the ability to fly, but it's because they're eating good, they're comfortable now. Scientists have now found more moa DNA from ancient eggshells, so it's possible that we may see these fatties soar the skies once again. Number 2, Megatherium. aka giant ground sloths. That's a bit of a nicer name. Yeah, sloths, let's bring those back. Wait, they're already here. I'm confused, Taylor. Sloths used to be a lot bigger than we think. We often look at them now for being so slow and silly. The movie Ice Age or Zootopia, they sure didn't help their case. Now, of course, the giant ground sloth is closely related to our modern three-toed sloth, but luckily for us, today's sloths aren't that big. They're not the same size as an elephant, which is pretty sweet. That would be a horror film. If a giant elephant-sized sloth started to climb that tree, slowly, might I add, I'd be sick. We may be able to bring this one back, although they died off 8,000 years ago. DNA samples were extracted from their hair remains, so the next step now is to develop a fetus in an artificial womb. That's the hard part. That's where science and technology might just do the rest. But as of right now, we've got a pile of hair. We're like, maybe. And finally, number 1, the gastric brooding frog. I'm a big fan of frogs and toads, all that stuff. Except for when they hatch eggs out of their back. That's arguably the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. We'll maybe show you after, maybe, I don't know. These gastric brooding frogs would swallow their eggs and then hatch them out of their mouth. So if you watch them give birth in reverse, it would be pretty confusing. That would be a horror film. They went extinct back in 1983, but scientists have figured out how to implant these dead cells into a fresh egg from an entirely different frog species. Let's just hope these new ones aren't born out of your back. Kicking off the list at number 10, SS Garsopa. We'll kick off this deep sea part 3 with a shipwreck. Whenever it comes to underwater stuff, I think I have thalassophobia. These were hard to look at and look into, rather. I got chills looking at these photos, honestly. The SS Garsopa was once a thriving British cargo ship. Back in 1941, during World War II, the cargo ship was en route, returning from India carrying a pretty nice amount of silver. It was a lot of silver, an alarming amount of silver. A storm rolled in, so the captain made a quick decision, knowing what was on board, to avoid the rough waters as much as possible. So the ship changed direction and started heading towards Ireland. Again, this was 1941 during World War II, so not a great time to head that direction. The ship was spotted by a German plane, and a U-boat later claimed the lives of the SS Garsopa's 85 passengers. News traveled quickly, and once the war came to an end, a few divers checked out the area. There was nothing. Now fast forward to 2011, Odyssey Marine's team found the ship. 14,000 feet below the surface, surrounded by just pure darkness. The team kept around 80% of the treasure found, and the rest went to Her Majesty's treasury. In case you were wondering, there was around $150 million worth of treasure found. Yeah, if you can do it, then go grab it, sure. It's like one of those things where someone's like, hey, you want $150 million? Go into this deep, dark, scary thing. Would you do it? No, my answer is no. Number 9, Ram's horn squid. This little squishy dude was discovered around 3,000 feet below the surface, and scientists cannot stop talking about the way he moves. Look at him, he looks like a really slow submarine, which is pretty amazing when you think about the Schmitz Ocean ROV that's down there getting this footage. It's also a submarine. How funny is that? He's looking at him, he's looking at them. They're like, what? He's like, what? They're all just both wiggling, trying to balance each other out. His body acts like a submarine's ballast does. Fluids and gases shift around, and in return, this little guy can float up and down whilst wiggling his toes. Look at him. I never thought a squid would be cute until now. Didn't know that was a possibility. Yet here we are. Part 3, most amazing. Cute squid. Number 8, Catherine Sullivan. Not really a deep sea discovery, but I mean, when talking about all these discoveries, you gotta ask, who goes down there? Who does the thing, right? When an entertainer wins an Oscar, Emmy, Tony, and Grammy, we call that an EGOT. Fun little title only a handful of artists can claim. But what about somebody who's been to both space and the deepest part of our Earth? What do we call them? Well, so far, them is just one individual. Her name's Catherine Sullivan. The former NASA astronaut decided to change up directions for this trip, so she joined Victor Vescovo on one of his 8 trips to the deepest known point on Earth. July 7th, 2020, Catherine Sullivan officially became the first person to do both. Go out there and then down there. That's crazy. Your Fitbit's like, what are you doing? What's happening? How many steps is this? What can we call this impressive title? EGOT, a deep got? A deep got go-getter? A deep go-getter? Yeah, you're a deep go-getter. That sounds awful. We're doing our best here. Maybe part 4 will have a fun name. It's impressive. It's so impressive my ears hurt thinking about all these commutes. Bravo. Hats off to you. Number 7, Holy Grail of shipwrecks. Okay, back to shipwrecks. It's hard to read up on these shipwrecks sometimes, well, all the time, because on one hand, it's fascinating to discover parts of our history we thought was once lost forever. Of course, we find tons of treasure. That's always fun and noteworthy, but we're also exploring the scene of a horrible wreck every single time. It's quite grim, not on paper. In 1708, the San Jose galleon was heading to Spain from Colombia, but when the British attacked, the San Jose sank to the ocean floor and nearly all 600 crew members lost their lives. Yeah, dark history. In 2015, the ship was found with around $17 to $22 billion worth of plundered valuables. See, back in the 80s, 1980s, Glocamora Company claimed they had found the ship. Columbia was lacking the financial and technological resources to dive down and actually get it, so they agreed to give GMC 35% of the findings. In 1984, they then handed the rights over to an American company, Sea Search Armada. Then the game changed. Since then, and still to this day, legal battles have been unfolding over this lost treasure. COVID delayed it quite a bit, so if you can hold your breath for a really long time, it's still waiting there. No one knows what to do with it yet. I'm like, see ya, be right back. Number 6, the VASA shipwreck. Back in 1628, the VASA sunk within 20 minutes of setting sail, and it claimed the lives of 30 souls on board. How tragic is that? Only 20 minutes and it was gone. The Swedish Navy launched the ship August 10th, 1628, and it was once considered a high-tech warship, even referred to as spectacular. So what happened? How did this thing sink in 20 minutes? That's crazy. Well, the first rush of wind caught it off guard and it swayed a bit. The second rush of wind sank it. There's gotta be more. There was a crowd around and everything to send it off, but the 64 bronze cannons that were installed during the rushed process of building the ship were too heavy. That's why it sank. And the lack of oxygen in the water allowed for its rediscovery to continue its story. The VASA was built with carvings all around the wood, carvings centered around the king at the time, King Gustav II. So when the wreck was rediscovered in 1961, 95% of the wood was still intact, so it still tells a story. Number 5, under the ice. This dark discovery was pretty recent. Recent as in October 2021. The HACON project is one I would never sign up for personally, but I'm surprised it's taken this long to do something along these lines. The HACON project is a group of around 30 scientists. They teamed up to send a deep sea robot 13,000 feet below the icy surface of the Arctic Ocean. This was the first time we got to see the hidden volcanic vents that have been hiding for centuries, because obviously it's that deep and that cold, and now we have the resources and people who are brave enough to go and camp out in the Arctic to go explore. That's crazy. Number 4, ancient Greek shipwreck. I remember hearing about this back in 2018, so I'm excited I get to throw it on a list. The oldest shipwreck discovered in the Black Sea. It looks like it sank 50 years ago, but actually this ship is from 400 BC. It's an ancient Greek trading vessel and it's not very large, but somehow this thing is very mighty. 2,400 years later, over a mile below the surface, the lack of oxygen again actually preserved this ship. That's why it looks not ancient. John Adams, principal investigator with the Black Sea Marine Archaeology Project, describes the findings as something he never thought was even possible. Yeah, more than fair. That long ago, like, we're still trying to figure out the pyramids. We're like, oh my god, this thing's just chilling there the whole time. Just a fish is staring at it. This discovery changed what we knew about seafaring in the ancient world. The oldest intact shipwreck known to mankind. That's not a bad title. Another 2,000 years we'll find nothing but plastic on the bottom of our oceans. Number 3, underwater river. We've heard about this one at some point, I'm sure, but how is this even a real thing? How is this possible? What are we looking at? What is this? Back in 2016, researchers working in the Black Sea found these very strong currents. Currents of water flowing at the bottom of the sea like its own river almost. If this 115-foot deep river was on land instead of, well, under the Black Sea, it would be ranked number 6 in the world for the amount of volume alone that's constantly rushing through it. So pretty impressive. The river carries heavy sediments along the seafloor, hence why it makes those grooves over time. And yeah, over time those currents carve out their own path, and now it's massive and extremely powerful and unstoppable. But luckily for us, you need a deep sea rover to take a good look, so you're not gonna fall in anytime soon. Number 2, deep waste. I mentioned some deep sea plastic on this channel before, but this 2021 discovery is just a new low, pun intended. Right off the coast of LA, hiding around 4,000 feet below the ocean's surface, sitting there for quite a long time, were literal barrels of garbage, just waste. The plume of evil coming off of these things also, it looks like a nuclear wasteland. Probably because it is a literal nuclear wasteland. How horrible is that? There weren't 30 or 40 of these barrels also, in case you're wondering. There were thousands. Around 27,000 were found. 2 weeks of searching with subs. What a sad expedition that must have been. Oh my. These barrels were dropping into the ocean around 1947 to around 1961. That's the window of time. You'd think after barrel 5,000, somebody would be like, this feels wrong. I don't know. And finally, number 1. Beneath a glacier. We had to end this part 3 on some new footage from the bottom of an Antarctic glacier. And this glacier also, in case you're wondering, is the size of Florida. So if you're imagining like a big ice cube, it's a bit bigger than that, just a little bit. This is like finding the bottom of a continent. This thing is massive. And we sent a rover underneath all of it. How scary is that? If it were to collapse, our sea levels would rise 10 feet, just to give you an idea of how big it is. And in 2019, researchers drilled 2,300 feet right through the Thwaites Glacier and dropped a robot with a camera down, and then they just roamed around and they saw this. Hold your breath. This is the first time we've ever seen the grounding zone of a massive glacier. There's only 1 meter of space between the bottom of the glacier and the rocky seafloor. Could you go down there? I don't think I could. I would swim underneath it and pretend like I'm lifting it up, you know? Just kidding. I wouldn't even get into the submarine to go down this hole. Not a chance. Also, can we not drill through a glacier the size of Florida? Just sounds like a bad idea. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe leave this project alone.
Starting off this countdown, we have the secret underground community. Believe it or not, but there is a group of urban explorers that like to hang out in the Paris catacombs. They call themselves the Cataphiles, and they sneak into the tunnels, evade the police, and then go exploring. In fact, they have claimed a number of sections as their own, marking it with murals and graffiti. Not only that, but they have found secret ways to get into the catacombs. Plus, they've started mapping the whole place out so that other explorers don't get lost. Only problem is that this is a very dangerous hobby. Since they are entering restricted areas in the catacombs, they have to watch out for crumbling walls, falling rocks, even pools of water. I don't know about you, but I prefer to spend my time with the living and not the dead. In our 9th spot, we have the Lost Girl. In 2005, a group of teens illegally snuck into the catacombs on New Year's. Sadly, they all didn't make it out alive. They all were drinking and having a blast when one of their friends, Masha, wandered off alone. When they finally realized she had disappeared, they went out looking for her but couldn't find her. No one knew what happened to her until 4 months later. That's when a group of boys were exploring the catacombs when they stumbled upon her frozen body. Since she was drunk, she wandered off to another section of the catacombs and then got lost and froze to death. How heartbreaking. Coming in at number 8, we have Philibert Aspel. Philibert Aspel was a doorkeeper at the Val de Grace Hospital during the French Revolution. And the hotel actually had a staircase located in the courtyard that would lead to the catacombs. So one night in November of 1793, Philibert descended into the catacombs to retrieve a bottle of liquor stored down there. However, he only brought one candle with him and it was not enough to light the way. Eventually it blew out and he was down there in pitch black. Being semi-intoxicated, he stumbled around the catacombs lost. For 11 years, no one knew what happened to him. That was until 1804 when his body was found. He was identified by the hospital keyring hanging from his belt. Moving on, number 7, we have the Whispering Walls. A number of explorers have claimed that no one should ever be in the Paris catacombs after midnight. For if you are, then the walls will begin to speak. People have claimed to have heard disembodied voices coming from the catacombs. These voices confuse them and try to persuade them to travel deeper and deeper into the catacombs until you're in too far that you're lost and you can't escape. Actually, fun fact, they use this as inspiration for the movie As Above, So Below, which takes place in the Paris catacombs. In our 6th spot today, we have the camera system. In 2004, a group of French police explored some of the restricted areas of the Paris catacombs. And that's when they discovered something truly terrifying. First, they found a PA system that when triggered would play sounds of guard dogs barking. Then they found a full-on bar, living area, workshop, lounge, and cinema with space to fit 20 people. Like what? Not only that, but whoever created this little home setup was stealing other people's electricity from above. The creepiest part is that they had a full-on security camera set up, and the police soon realized that they were being watched. They left to get a bigger team to further investigate the area, but by the time they got back, everything was gone. The only thing left was a note that read, "Don't search." We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with de Queul. De Queul is the name of a very mysterious man. We don't know much about him, but we do know that he was a veteran of the French army, and he was also an artist. In fact, he created a number of sculptures for the catacombs. However, this eventually led to his death. During the construction of one of his sculptures, a part of it fell and crushed him completely. It's said that to this day, his soul wanders the catacombs. In fact, people have seen him down there before. In our 4th spot today, we have the Crypt of Passions. The Crypt of Passions, located in the ossuary, is a pillar that is covered in skulls to the point that it's just completely concealed. The skulls end up forming what looks like a barrel, which is creepy for a number of reasons. Just take in, those are real skulls. You're surrounded by people who used to be living, and most of them died in tragic ways, and then their bones were used for an art display. A number of people who have visited this area in the catacombs have reported feeling very uneasy around the Crypt of Passion. It's believed that some of the souls that were placed there have not found peace. I mean, in some cultures they believe that a proper burial must be done with a tomb marker, or else the soul will never be able to rest or go to the afterlife. However, that was not possible at the time. The catacombs were built because grave overcrowding was a serious issue back then, among other things. In our third spot today, we have the scratch marks. There's this really creepy area in the Paris catacombs where it's just a wall of scratches. Like, it looks as if bodies rose from the dead and tried to scratch their way out. It's a creepy touch to the place, that's for sure. Moving on at number 2, we have the lost tape. Now, I'm sure all of you have heard about this urban legend before, and in fact it also inspired the movie As Above, So Below. And it might not even be a legend, it might be real, but to this day, no one knows. Once upon a time, in 1990, a weird dusty camcorder was discovered in the catacombs. The camera appeared to have been there for quite some time, so they decided to inspect it. What was found on it was very disturbing. The video was of an unidentified male explorer wandering around the catacombs. While down there, we see him interacting with the skulls around him. But then something spooks the man and he ends up growing paranoid and panicked. At one point, he drops the camera and just runs away. Sadly, he never made it out alive. This tape contains the final moments of his life. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the criminals. In 2017, it was discovered that a group of robbers used the catacombs to break into an apartment. Basically, they figured out that the catacombs were right under an apartment vault. So they drilled their way in through the limestone and entered the apartment to steal over 300 bottles of vintage wine. In total, they valued at close to 250,000 euros. Isn't that insane?